There we go. If you do have a question, please use the chat feature. We'll be monitoring the questions and comments that come into that chat feature. After this meeting, within the next week or so, the slides that we share will be available on the HCPUF TSAC page that's listed there. If you are listening by phone, you can press *6 to unmute your line or *9 to raise your hand. As always, please feel free to utilize the closed captioning feature by clicking the CC icon at the bottom of your screen. And for future meetings, if you do need accommodations, please email the email address that we have listed there. What we do here at HCPUF is we administer Health First Colorado Medicaid program and Child Health Plan Plus and other healthcare programs for Coloradans who qualify. And our mission is to improve healthcare equity, access, and outcomes for the people we serve while saving Coloradans money on healthcare and driving value for Colorado. I'm really excited about our agenda today. We have a great presentation from Michelle Adams. She is the Senior Health Literacy Specialist here at HCPUF, and she is going to be sharing some really valuable information about plain language, which is important for all of us, for all of our communications, whether with members or between other agencies or others that we communicate with. And then we're going to have our AssureCare team answer a couple of questions that have come in about the care and case management system. And then we'll have a discussion about upcoming meetings, as well as a time for open questions and discussion. Any questions or comments before we turn it over to Michelle? All right, sounds good. Michelle, then I will turn it to you and allow you to introduce yourself, and thank you in advance for presenting.
Of course. Hi, everybody. I'm Michelle Adams, and I've been with HCPUF for almost 16 years. And as Amy said, I'm the Senior Health Literacy Specialist, and the team I'm on, we write and rewrite and edit member communications for plain language to be in compliance with state and federal statutes. And so we're going to talk today about what plain language writing is all about. There's a lot that we're about to go through in the next hour. So I just want to say that if anybody has questions, first of all, feel free to ask them. But don't worry if you if the pace is fast and then later you have questions or something comes up, you can just email me directly. It's fine. And you can just ask me whatever you want to ask. And I also, give other plain language trainings and things. And so this won't be your last chance to pick my brain about something if you want to. I just want to put that out there because the pace on this is going to be pretty fast. So yeah, we can get started. And then I am actually going to go off camera if that's okay, because sometimes my internet gets a little funny and I don't want to be lagging. So Amy, if that's all right, I'm going to do that now. Okay. All right, great. All right, so let's get going. I love to start with this quote in the plain language training: simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, because I think there are a lot of misconceptions about plain language, and when properly executed, it is actually excellent writing. So next slide, please. Okay, so today we're going to talk about audience and purpose. These are the first two things you should consider when you're writing. It doesn't matter what you're writing, whatever it is, audience and purpose are key, and it's always the starting point. And then we're going to talk about some misconceptions about plain language and the hidden dangers of not using it. And then we're going to talk about the nuts and bolts of it. What do we mean when we say let's write in plain language? It's about things like sentence structure, word choice, passive voice, things like this. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk a little bit about consumer testing. There's really no substitute for that. It's when you write something, you put it in front of an actual human, and then they talk to you about it. And that's how you figure out if it's making sense or not. And then we have a plain language review process. We'll talk about that briefly. For most of what you guys are doing, it sounds like that's not something you need a ton of detail on, but we can touch on it briefly. And then we're going to talk about some of the state laws that we're under. HCPUF has two state laws in particular that apply to member correspondence, and we get audited on that. And so unlike other state agencies, we've got some very specific requirements for our member comms. So we're going to talk about that. And then my favorite part of the training, we're going to go through actual samples. These are real life things that came to us from HICPUF staff or partners. And we'll show you, like, here's how it came to us. Here's what we did to it. So next slide, please. Okay, so again, first step, whatever it is you're writing, your first stop is audience and purpose, right? And I'm sure that sounds pretty obvious, but when you start digging into it, it gets a little more complicated than you may think. So of course, for our purposes at HICPUF, we've got a variety of audiences. And then next slide, please. So one of the most important tenets of plain language writing is that you don't want to include anything in the writing that is not relevant to your audience and purpose. So for this reason, we don't want to mix audiences. When we mix audiences, invariably we have information that some of the people reading it are going to need and understand and want, and other people will not. And this just compounds the problems of communication that we have. So we don't want to mix audiences. Good example of this is, when the Affordable Care Act expanded Medicaid, right? We had county workers and eligibility workers and partners who needed to understand what the new changes were. We had legislators we needed to make the case to because we had to get their approval to expand. We had members of the public who had never qualified before, didn't necessarily even know what Medicaid was, and suddenly they were going to be eligible, so we needed to communicate to them. So the topic was the same, but because the audiences were so different and their needs were so different, the information itself was actually quite different for the different audiences. And we don't want a single document or a piece of communication to be trying to meet the needs of various audiences. We want to focus in as much as we can on a particular audience. And even within member audiences, there's even a further focus beyond that we'll talk about as we get further into the training. So yeah, identify our audience, right? And then what is it that we want them to do or believe or know? And then just a friendly reminder, I'm sure all of you on this call are already, on this page, but essentially, we are public servants. It's our job to be understandable. And it's literally required in state statute. So, nothing we're sending should be a reading test. That should be the farthest thing from someone's experience when they're getting our information. Next slide, please. Okay, so our audiences are very diverse. They have varying degrees of literacy and health literacy, which are two different things. So we're going to talk about that in a second. So, what do they already know and what's going to be important to them? What's important to a lawmaker or a stakeholder may or may not necessarily be important to the member. So again, not mixing audience and trying to suss out, okay, which pieces of this are going to matter to each audience. And then for like the what do they already know, the way that we would communicate with members who have already spent time within, like, let's say, the world of long-term services and supports, they're going to have a different knowledge base than a member who's just coming into that, or a member who doesn't receive long-term services and supports. So these are the things we want to keep in mind. That's kind of that further honing of the audience. If it's a document or a flyer or something that a case manager is going to be handing to somebody directly, that's a very different communication than something that's just going to be coming through the mail cold, right? So what are the conditions of this audience, right? How are they going to be getting this information? What's going to be important to them? What do they already know or probably know? What obstacles might they face in understanding or acting on the information? So for example, when we were communicating with members during COVID, telling them, hey, the COVID vaccines are available, here's how to get one, we knew going into it that many people, especially if they lived in rural areas, they may have trouble getting to a clinic, right? Like physically getting to a clinic to get the shot if they wanted one. And so knowing that ahead of time, we included in the messaging information about NEMT, which is the non-emergent medical transportation benefit. So, if you'd love to go get a shot, but you don't have a way to get there, we're anticipating that for this audience, and we're going to include information about NEMT, right? So just trying to put that member hat on, right? for this particular communication, why are we communicating with them? What is going to be important to them? How can we catch their attention and say things in a way that they're going to understand? You know, what is their existing vocabulary? What obstacles might they face? How are they going to be getting this information? All of these questions are important in us, like honing in on the audience. Next slide, please. So we have a member experience advisory council. We call the council MEAC. I'm not sure if you guys on this call are already familiar with MEAC, but they are real life members who serve 2-year terms on MEAC. And even though this council has existed for about a decade, so we've cycled through different members throughout the years, some of the feedback we get is consistent through time. And this is some of the stuff that we've learned from them. When they get letters from us, there's an immediate fear response, anxiety, or even anger. They're worried. They're worried that they're losing something. They're not going to understand the letter. We know that people will receive duplicative or contradictory correspondence. They'll get a letter on Tuesday that says one thing, and then they get a letter 2 days later that says something else. So people are weary, right, with our communications. And that's something we know, and we're working on it and trying to do everything we can about that. But because of all of this, we know that, you know, people have told us they'll often put our communications in a pile, right? Oh, I'll deal with that later. Clearly, this is the last thing we want. A lot of these letters have deadlines in them, and, you know, we want them to respond by the deadline in the letter. And for a host of reasons, this is not ideal, right? So knowing all of this about our communications is just something that we all want to keep in mind and try to address with the way that we're communicating with people. Next slide, please. Okay. A wealth of information creates a poverty of attention. So in addition to the emotional state that people will often find themselves in when they're getting information from the department, we also know that all of us are being pulled in a lot of different directions. This is going to also have an effect on cognition. So when people are upset or scared, or if they're inundated with a lot of information from multiple sources, or even just within a particular letter, their ability to comprehend is going to immediately go down. It's going to be affected in a detrimental way right off the bat. So this is just something we want to keep in mind when we're putting our comms together. So let's talk a little bit about literacy. In the US and around the world, we have a problem with literacy, and the stats are not great. Next slide, please. So for about 70 to 80% of people with poor reading skills are likely dyslexic. It's the most common learning disability. I'm sure many of you on this call already know more than I do about this, but I just like to point this out in trainings because not everybody is aware. When people have low literacy, this is often the reason why. It's notoriously underdiagnosed and misunderstood, and it affects people of all different backgrounds. And, it doesn't matter who your audience is. Your audience is lawmakers, your audience is stakeholders, your audience is members. You will have dyslexic readers in your audience. And so it's just something I like to make sure people are aware of. Next slide, please. The good news on that front, though, is that plain language best practices are helpful for people with dyslexia. So low literacy readers have certain characteristics. They struggle through every word and phrase, right? They're going to have trouble tracking words visually. They will often skip lines of text and lose their place. By the end of the writing, they've forgotten the beginning. All of this is an argument for keeping things short and simple. And again, let's not include anything that does not absolutely have to be in the communication to serve the audience and purpose. Next slide. Okay, so then so there's literacy, and then there's health literacy. So health literacy specifically is how well someone can basically use and understand their health coverage, understand what their doctor is trying to tell them, understand instructions on a pill bottle, or when they're being discharged from a hospital, right? So health literacy is, Can you look at a table and figure out what your copay is? This kind of stuff, right? Next slide, please. And unfortunately, as much of a problem as we have with literacy, the health literacy numbers are even worse. Very few adults are fully health literate. And next slide, please. So even people who can read well normally, like in usual circumstances, can have health literacy issues if they're not familiar with some of the terms or concepts. If they have to interpret stats and evaluate risk, this is something that people often have trouble with. If they're diagnosed with a serious illness and they're scared or confused, or, for any reason they're scared and confused. Again, when people get upset, their ability to comprehend just is immediately affected. And then, of course, health conditions that require complicated self-care. And, there are stats that try to address, the effect that this is having. It affects so many things, obviously. It affects people's health outcomes. It affects the healthcare system itself. It's way more expensive when someone ends up back in the ER because when we discharge them, they don't understand what we're saying, right? Like this kind of thing. Or, someone doesn't understand a letter that we send them from HCPF and then they lose their benefits, right? This kind of thing. So very few US adults actually are proficient in health literacy. Yeah. So that's, this is just kind of information about the environment that we're writing to. Next slide, please. Okay, so then organizational health literacy is why we're all here, right? This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out ways to help people find, understand, use information about health and healthcare. And so in this part of the training, I just like to give a shout out to some other plain language writing acts and activities. Especially when we started this work at HCPF, a lot of people did not realize that plain language writing is actually a worldwide movement that has existed since the mid 20th century. And it's not just some weird thing that HCPF is making us do. And so one example is that in 2010, on a federal level, Congress passed a law saying that federal agencies have to use clear communication that the public can understand. And you can go online and see the grade letters that these different Fed agencies get every year for their communications with the public. They get like A, B, C, D, F grades, right? So that's one piece. Next slide. And then the Affordable Care Act itself has some elements of plain language requirement in there. Next slide, please. And then I got so excited when I saw this. Recently, the Office of Civil Rights released guidance that included plain language in its overall disability and accessibility guidelines, right? So when we talk about something being accessible, it's about all of this, right? It's about Braille if someone needs it. It's about captioning when someone needs it. It's about interpreters and translation, and it's about all of it. And part of it is plain language. So we're all very excited to see that. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about audience and the conditions we're writing to. Let's talk a little about purpose. If it's not clear to you, it's not going to be clear to the reader. And I know that, again, that just sounds so obvious, but it's amazing how many times things will come our way and they're a little confusing and we start digging into it with the original author. And then it's like, it just becomes clear that sometimes different people on a team will have a different idea about what the purpose is supposed to be, and things can get really muddy. So just trying to hone in, again, audience and purpose is really what it's all about. Next slide, please. Okay, so your purpose is going to be your guide. When it comes to organization, layout, word choice, sentence structure, your purpose, all of that should be in support of your purpose and audience. So for example, if there's a call to action, you need people to do something by a certain date. You're going to make sure that that is in the very first paragraph, as high up there as you can get it, right? Don't bury the lead. The way that you lay it out, if there are steps that someone has to take, we're going to want to lay those out in a logical way and number them. So your purpose is really your guide. Next slide, please. So here's another fun quote. I experience this every day. The biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has been accomplished. We get reminders of this all the time. It's tough, but we're still, we're all going to muddle through it and hopefully get where we need to be. So let's talk about some misconceptions about plain language. Some people will say, well, that's just dumbing things down. But the truth is that plain language isn't dumbing things down, it's clearing things up. And there's growing evidence that even professionals prefer plain language. And that is actually a hyperlink, just in case you guys get access to the slides. That's the underlying part is a hyperlink to an article about this, that, even people with advanced degrees, why spend 5 pages on something when you can just read it on one, right? Why spend an hour going through something when you can do it in 10 minutes? Like, people are just increasingly pressed for time, inundated by information coming at them from so many different sources. And it's just, there's a movement generally toward plain language, even outside of the work that we're doing here. So it's reader focused writing, right? You're going to take out anything that is not necessary to your audience and purpose. You're going to make it clear, and you're going to respect your reader's time and competing priorities. There are plain language best practices and principles that really do fly in the face in the way of, like, the way that we were all taught to write in high school and in college by our English teachers. It was a lot of, this has to be 5 pages long. And if it's not at least 5 pages, I'm not even going to read it. And it needs to have an introduction and a conclusion. And there are lots of fluffy transitions and all these things. That kind of writing is completely appropriate for certain audiences and purposes, but it is not what we want here. So I just kind of like to flag that sometimes the plain language best practices can be a little bit weird for people at first, because some of it flies in the face of the formal writing training that we've all received. Next slide. So another misconception is, like, rewriting is a nice, editing, it's a nice extra, it's a nice to have, it's not a necessity. But the truth is, no one gets it right the first time, not even professional writers. All writing benefits from editing and revision, and it's an essential part of the plain language writing process. You cannot have good plain language writing without rewriting and editing and consumer testing, which we'll talk about in just a second. I like to tell people, Ernest Hemingway had an editor, Maya Angelou, like all of these, like, famous authors, Toni Morrison, Nobel Prize winning author, like, arguably she's one of the best authors in American history. She had an editor. If she needs one, I definitely need one, and we all do, right? So another misconception, important things are long and wordy. When we first started unrolling this at HICPUF, we did have people sometimes have almost like a reaction to what they would see, after we had taken their original writing and turned it into plain language. It was like, well, it doesn't sound important anymore. Well, the most important thing is that people understand what we're saying. So just keeping that in mind. And then, if the reader doesn't understand, they don't care enough, or they're not trying hard enough. It just absolutely not the case. People are struggling to understand our correspondence, and they are definitely trying. It's just that a lot of our correspondence is really difficult to understand. What's important to me is important to them. Like, a lot of times, a subject matter expert, when they write an initial draft, they'll start out citing a statute or something like that. But when it comes to member comms, in most cases, that's not the thing that's going to be popping most for members. So, again, audience and purpose, putting that member hat on. And then another misconception, you should never use you in formal writing. Plain language writing uses you all the time. And we'll talk about the parameters around that to make sure that it's understandable. Next slide, please. Okay, this is very important. A lot of people use grade level readers to try to determine if their writing is understandable, right? So they'll put it through, like, if you're in Microsoft Word, you can get a reading from Word that says Flesh Kincaid, like 6th grade level or whatever it is. Those reading level tests are not going to help us. We don't use them. And in fact, when the legislation back in 2017 came through for, there was a piece of legislation for plain language writing in our member comms, and then another one for the auditing of it. We were careful not to include a grade level marker in those pieces of legislation, because that is not how we do it. Plain language writing is all about using the best practices and then member testing, putting it in front of a real life human who's going to read it and talk to you about it. And so now we're going to talk about why. So this list right here, these are kind of the top 5 different ones that people will use. And these are calculators. They don't read. They count the number of syllables. They count the length of sentences. And they also conflict with one another. So if you give a piece of writing to all 5 of them, they'll give you different results. So I'm going to take us through an exercise to explain exactly what I'm talking about here. So go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So there are places online where you can pop in your stuff and it'll give you the reading. This is the one I used for this example. Next slide, please. Excuse me. I'm not sure if all of you are familiar with lorem ipsum language, but this is just like fake Latin placeholder language that designers and other comms people will use as placeholder language in a document when they're doing layout, right? So it's like, we want a flyer that tells, new moms about a lactation specialist, right? Like when they're laying out, we want it to be this many columns and this and this and that. This is just like placeholder language until the real language comes through. It's not real and it doesn't mean anything. So next slide, please. When we put that into the reader, we get grade level readings back from it. So one thing popping out immediately, we've got such a variation here, right? ARI is saying that it's at 12.56. Gunning Fog is saying 19.42. Yeah, they're calculators. So then go to the next slide, please. So then, yeah, because they're calculators counting numbers of words and syllables and things, I just threw in a couple of periods. Next slide. And then look at that. The reading level comes down. Now, according to ARI, a 6th grader should be able to read this and understand it, right? Next slide, please. And this is just another example of it in Word, right? Literally blah, 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 right? Just nonsense. And then next slide. So it's saying, yep, Flesh Kincaid is giving us a grade level reading there. It seems a little high, though. Maybe we can get that down. Next slide, please. Add some periods. And let's try again. Next slide. Oh, looky there. Now we're at a 6th grade reading level. So for these reasons, we don't use these readers. They don't agree with one another. They're calculators. They're not reading. Next slide, please. They cannot measure comprehension. Reading and comprehension are 2 different things. They don't consider layout and design, both of which are key in plain language writing. And we're going to talk about that in a second. They cannot detect conflicts or ambiguity in language because they don't read. They're not checking for inclusive language. They can't check for style and tone and all these other things, right? Next slide. So yeah, reading and comprehension are not the same. Next slide. I can read this, but I don't understand it. Yeah, I don't understand this. But when I read it, I'm seeing keywords that I've heard in other contexts, right? I'm seeing the word quantum. I'm seeing wave, right? I'm seeing light, right? I'm seeing the word experiment and observation, right? Next slide. So here's the problem with not writing in plain language. Humans try to apply previous experience and knowledge to their, current situation. If they're trying to figure out a problem or they're trying to read something and they don't really understand it, they're going to look back at previous experience and try to fill in the blanks, right? So for me, when I saw those words, it made me think of this nature show that I saw on television, right? I have no idea if that's right. For the purposes of this training, I've never found out because the point I'm trying to make here is that when things are not understandable, people are going to try to fill in the blanks on their own. They're going to grab bits and pieces from their previous experience and other things they've heard or learned, and they're going to pile it on top of what you're trying to communicate. We've seen this happen a million times in MEAC, right? So we don't want that. We don't want people filling in their own blanks. There's way too much of a risk that they're going to fill in those blanks in the way that is not appropriate for what we're trying to communicate. Next slide, please. So yeah, we don't want, that's, this is what we're trying to avoid, right? So here's an interesting example. This was actually in a piece of HICPUF communication that came our way. There was a letter we were sending members. We were giving them a gift card for helping us. It was like, here's your gift card for helping us with this thing. So part of the language in the letter to give them the gift card said this: the cardholder shall be liable for all unauthorized card transactions effected following such loss, theft, or disclosure, whether they are effected as a result of the unauthorized use of the card. Contractor will not be held liable for any cardholder purchase. And when on our end, not knowing anything about that, when we read that, we got freaked out. We were like, whoa, are we trying to tell people that, like, if they lose their gift card and someone else uses it to, like, buy cigarettes, that they're going to get in trouble? Like, I mean, that is really how we were reading it. So next slide. Oh yeah, sorry. That, this just kind of reiterates what I just said, but the interesting thing is, once we went back to the SMEs and we were like, what is this? This sounds so serious and scary. Long story short, we ended up just deleting it entirely. Honestly, I don't even know why it was in there in the first place. Like, the point of this is, just because something sounds important doesn't necessarily mean that it is. Question assumptions. It's okay. Around here, this happens all the time. It's half of my day. We've got subject matter experts saying, no, we have to say this way. And then the writers come in and we're like, well, let's talk about it. Why are we saying it this way? And do we really have to say it in exactly this way? Or is there some flexibility here? Excuse me. So yeah, the bottom line is, we don't want to write in a way that the reader is filling in the blanks. That's it's going to be absolutely detrimental to our purposes here. Okay, so sorry, next slide. All right, so here's another fun quote. I love this so much because it really captures so much about plain language. A sentence should contain no unnecessary words, a paragraph, no unnecessary sentences, for the same reason that a drawing should have no unnecessary lines and a machine no unnecessary parts. Okay, next slide. So think of it as like your sentence is a machine that's making a message. If you have unnecessary parts in there, you're putting the whole thing at risk. So yeah, don't put your machine and your message at risk. Unnecessary parts contribute nothing but risk. So again, audience and purpose. Who are we writing to? Why? Do not mix your audiences and make sure that you're just sticking to what's absolutely essential. Okay, next slide, please. So then let's talk nuts and bolts. Okay, so we're talking organization and logical order, layout, sentence structure, word choice, and consistency. Next slide. Oh, yeah. The letter I've written today is longer than usual because I lacked the time to make it shorter. I just kind of like to give a shout out to anybody who is new to this process. It can be time consuming. So try to keep that in mind when you're putting together materials. Next slide. Okay, so you're going to organize to the reader's needs. Again, plain language writing is very reader focused. So you think like your reader. If I'm this person and I'm getting this information, what's going to be important to me, right? So have someone review your first draft. Make sure your purpose is clear in the first paragraph. Take out anything that is not necessary to the audience and purpose. Move things around so related things are together. This is one of the biggest things we find when we edit for plain language, is that people put a first draft together and they send it to us, and there's the organization is off, right? Things are kind of jumping around between different topics. So we want to move things so that related things are together. Next slide. If there are instructions, they need to be ordered one step at a time, clear, brief, consistent. When possible, try to start each bullet with the same part of speech. If there's a call to action, make it an action verb, right? Write, send, read, call. Next slide. Okay, we're going to talk about layout and design. Again, key. Content precedes design. Design in the absence of content is not design, it's decoration. So for the purposes of plain language writing, when we talk about design, we're not talking about making it pretty. We're talking about visual cues for the reader to make the content digestible. Next slide. So again, think of the layout as these are visual cues for the reader. And especially for people who have dyslexia, the use of white space, the layout, bullets, headers, using bold, all of these things are going to be key to helping them understand what we're communicating, right? So if it's a letter, we want a title for each letter that explains the main point of the letter, right? Any of you who have like an education background, it's like creating that anticipatory set, right? Like you've got a title in the letter that helps the reader prep their mind. Okay, this letter is going to be about this thing. So they can kind of like put that hat on, right? You want sections where appropriate. They should be bold. You want to break content up into paragraphs. We want white space, right? We want bullets when appropriate. We want numbers when appropriate. We want to make it visually digestible for people. Okay, next slide. For emphasis, we're going to want to use bold instead of italics or underlining. Italics are difficult for some readers. Underlining, especially if it's online, the only thing that should be underlined is a hyperlink. If you have an underline on where there is no hyperlink and it's online, people will think it's a broken hyperlink. You want to make sure the font size is appropriate, which is usually no smaller than 12. You want to use smaller numbers when possible if sharing percents. So 4 out of 5 and 80 out of 100 mathematically are identical. But for some reason, the human brain is just able to kind of wrap its head around 4 out of 5 better than 80 out of 100, even though mathematically they're the same. Next slide. Okay, yes. When you can control your font, and I know no one can always control their font. Like, for example, our state websites are in trebuchet, which frankly, I'm not super thrilled about, but there's nothing I'm going to be able to do about that. But when you can control your font, please be careful about the font you're picking. This slide shows the same 2 words, illuminate and learn, in these different fonts. And as you can see, these highlighted areas, like the capital I and the lowercase l in Arial, are almost identical. The spacing between the letters in Times New Roman is so crammed that, like in learn, that kind of looks like an M, but of course it's not an M. In trebuchet, that capital I and those lowercase l's are not making me happy. This is really difficult for dyslexic readers and just readers generally. Honestly, this is just not a good idea. So when you can control your font, try to keep that in mind. I personally love Verdana. It just has some really nice, spacing and like less ambiguous, like, yeah, less ambiguity with the letters. Okay, sorry, next slide. Okay, so another quote: the most valuable of all talents is that of never using 2 words when one will do. Next slide, please. So when we're talking about sentence structure, we want for plain language writing, we want active voice, not passive voice. Here are some examples that can help show the difference. The passive voice hides the actor. It hides the who, right? Again, audience and purpose. I'm sure you guys know lots of legal writing and lots of political writing uses passive voice. That's because they've got a different purpose than we do. For the purposes of plain language writing in HICPUF, we want active voice, right? Next slide. So we want short sentences. Ideally, only 1 breath needed to say the whole thing out loud, 1 idea per sentence. Our goal is that people don't have to reread to understand. We want simple sentence structure, subject, verb, object, close together, not separated by other phrases. Next slide. So here's just a quick refresher on objects and subjects and whatnot. This was also a piece of writing that came our way. DXC, who received the claim on July 14, DXC used to be a contractor who processed our provider claims. So DXC, who received the claim on July 14, adjusted it on September 1 to account for the 0.75 rate reduction. So the verbs in this case are received and adjusted. If you ask who received and adjusted, the answer is your subject. And then when you say, okay, DXC received and adjusted who or what, the answer is the claim, and that's your object. So that's just a quick refresher for anybody who might need it. So in any case, what we did, we just broke this into 2 sentences, and then again, just tried to simplify the sentence structure, right? DXC received the claim July 14. They adjusted the claim on September 1 because of the rate reduction. Okay, next slide. Okay, I just want to also quick shout out again. The writing that we do for plain language here at HICPUF, it violates things such as like don't use you, right? And another one that it violates is like the ending and prepositions. And I ended up putting this slide in here specifically because a lot of people got really freaked out when we would tell them like, no, it's okay to end a sentence in a preposition. It was like, I think it's like the trauma from all those years of English teachers like yelling at us that people are like, wait, are you sure? But yes, we're sure. Um, it's honestly, it's not, I don't even understand why this ever happened to English in the first place. English is a Germanic language, not a Romance language. And this is a grammar rule for Latin. So I don't know. But anyway, in any case, it's okay to end a sentence in a preposition. It's fine. Next slide. Really what we're shooting for with plain language writing is we want it to sound just like natural speech, just like the natural way that we would be talking to somebody if they were sitting in front of us, right? So with that in mind, we want to use familiar words that the reader is going to understand, not a word that they're going to have to look up. No advice is more elementary, and no advice is more difficult to accept. When we feel an impulse to use a marvelously exotic word, let us lie down until the impulse goes away. So yeah, as someone who loves words, this can be difficult. There have been times where there's just like the perfect word that I want to put somewhere, but if I have any doubt at all that the audience is going to understand the word, just scrap it. You just can't take the chance. Next slide. And again, it's about audience and purpose. So like if you're writing a poem, obviously go for it. Use whatever words you want, but for our purposes, we're not going to do that. Okay. So part of that is that we do not want to use different words for the same thing. This happens a lot and it really confuses people. So like exam and test, member and client, eligible and qualify, renewal and redetermination. These are all often used interchangeably and we don't want that. Especially in a single piece of writing, like, no, we just pick one and stick with it. I've actually seen in MEAC when things have come their way that do this, people will actually start making guesses, again, filling in those blanks, right? It's like, well, maybe eligible means this and qualify means that. And that's why they said qualify here and they said eligible somewhere else. So again, don't use different words for the same thing. And then we want to avoid idioms. There are so many idioms. I'm sure in this training alone, I have peppered you guys with, actually, there's an idiom right there, right? Like more idioms than we can count. The problem with the idioms is that a couple of problems. One, anyone who has trouble with figurative language can have trouble understanding idioms. They can be a little confusing. And it makes it harder on translators too. Like, so it's just better. And we also know that a lot of people whose first language is Spanish, they're reading our comms in English, even though they have the option for Spanish. We've got a couple of different theories going on why that is. We think one of the contributing factors is not everyone is aware that they can request materials in their language. And then another issue is we've heard people tell us that they don't trust the translations, so they would rather just go to the English, even though it's not their first language. So again, just for all of these reasons, let's avoid idioms. Next slide. Okay. Oh, sorry, go back one. I think we went too far. Yeah, there we go. So with verbs, yeah, you want simple present tense verbs. Don't be afraid of contractions. Again, this is one of those rules we're breaking that our teachers told us, don't ever put contractions in, formal writing or whatever. You don't have to use contractions, but if it sounds natural in the sentence, it's okay. I think that sometimes we won't use a contraction, ironically enough, for when it's do not, because sometimes we like to make the not bold just to make sure it's popping for the reader, right? Like, do not do this or whatever it is. But yeah, generally, you don't have to be afraid of contractions in plain language writing as long as it sounds natural. And then we want to make sure we put the word, like with modifiers, with those, adjectives, make sure it's close to the word it's modifying, just for clarity. Next slide. Okay, and so yes, we can use you and we in plain language member comms. The caveats here are that we want to make sure that the antecedent for that pronoun is clear, right? So after the provider speaks with the case manager, she contacts the member. Is she the provider or the case manager? It's not clear in that first sentence. So again, it's okay to use she and you and we and all of these things, but we want to make sure that it's very clear what that pronoun is referring to. So along those lines, a document should have like proper logo and other branding, a proper salutation and closing, so that people can see, if it says, "Dear Amy, sincerely, Health First Colorado," if we do it that way, and we've got like Health First Colorado branding on the letter, the reader should be able to understand, like, oh, okay, when they say you, they're talking about me. And when they say we, they're talking about Health First Colorado, right? So we just want to make sure pronouns are fine. We just have to make sure it's clear what the pronoun is referring to. Next slide, please. So here's a quick example of just how much of a difference this can make. Again, this is a real life piece of writing that came our way. It says, if a client disagrees with the department's decision about his or her allocation calculation, the aforesaid client may appeal to the state and have a hearing with a state administrative law judge. All requests for hearings must be filed within 30 days of the date of this notice. Okay, so we've got a lot of problems in here from plain language perspective. Next slide, please. So the first thing we did is we're just going to put in some pronouns here, right? We're not going to touch anything else just yet. We're just going to look at this with pronouns. Now we have, if you disagree with our decision about your allocation calculation, you may appeal and have a hearing with the state administration law judge, right? So right away, it's just a little more digestible using pronouns. Next slide, please. Now we still have a few problems in here, like allocation calculation is not going to be something many people know. And then we also have some tricky words in here like hearing and appeal and notice. All of those are words that have much more common everyday meanings as opposed to the legal meanings that they have in this piece of writing, right? So we want to try to clear that up. Next slide, please. So now here's where we are. Okay, so we say, if you disagree with our decision, you may appeal it. If you appeal, you'll be able to discuss your concerns about our decision with the state administrative law judge. You must file your appeal within 30 days of the date of this letter. So instead of notice, we're saying letter, right? We're kind of trying to bake in the concept of what an appeal is, because we don't actually know that all of these readers are going to, the appeals language appears in a lot of different places. Not everyone is necessarily going to know what it is. So again, just trying to find ways to make it more understandable. Next slide, please. So again, we're just trying to keep it simple. We're going to use familiar words. We're going to shorten wordy phrases. Don't assume your reader knows jargon and acronyms. If you have an acronym, identify it at the first instance, right? Write it out, parentheses with the acronym, and then you can use the acronym. Next slide. So yeah, word choice. We have a lot of fluffy expressions in government writing. And so, we can cut back on that. And again, especially for low literacy readers, people with dyslexia, the fewer words on that page, the better, right? So instead of saying, with the exception of, you can just say except, right? Instead of saying on a monthly basis, you can just say monthly, right? We can kind of chop some of that fat. And then of course, my personal pet peeve at the bottom can be found. More information can be found on the website. We can just say is, it's fine. More information is on the website. Next slide. So I just like to let everybody, of course, HICPUF staff absolutely need to be aware of this, but also for our partners. There were two pieces of legislation that came out in 2017 regarding Medicaid correspondence. And so the first one is this one, and it requires plain language writing, member testing and stakeholder engagement for certain, not every single thing we write, but for certain letters, really like the high stakes stuff, the stuff that comes with appeals language, the stuff that if you don't respond properly, you could lose a benefit or you could lose eligibility, that kind of thing. So this law does not apply to hey, go get your flu shot. But although we do try to incorporate plain language into all of those things, but when it comes to the purposes of the legislation, it's certain member correspondence. And then next slide, please. And then the companion bill for this is the audit bill that, the OSA comes in and they audit us periodically. We've had 2 audits so far. And they pull member letters and we've had 2 audits, and I'll tell you, I'm sure many of you on this call are familiar. The results were not good. We've got a lot of work to do. Good news on that front is we recently got approval to hire, we actually have a member comms team now. And so we're hopeful that we can start turning this ship around faster than we had been before we had the team. But in any case, just kind of like to let people know we have statutory requirements that we have to meet for member comms. So that's, if you're hearing a lot of buzz about this kind of thing and, people are asking about it, that's why. Okay, next slide. All right, so now we're going to get into my favorite part of the training, the nuts and bolts. Like, we're just going to go through actual examples. So here's just one last little fun quote. So the writer who breathes more words than he needs is making a chore for the reader who reads. Next slide. Okay, so this is a real life piece of writing that came our way. And it's about the CES program, which I would imagine a lot of you on this call are familiar. Can people like give a thumbs up or something if you've heard of CES before? Are you guys familiar with CES or not sure? This is a program for kids with certain kinds of disabilities. And so the subject matter experts wanted like a flyer, essentially, that a case manager could give to a parent or a guardian when they thought that there was a child who might be able to benefit from this support. And so this was the original language. And so I'm going to read this to you because I want us to we're going to put our hat on here, right? You are a parent of a child who has disabilities significant enough that the child is actually under threat of being placed outside the home, right? Out of home placement, and may have to leave the household because of the child's needs are exceeding what the family can keep up with in the home, right? So this was the original language. It started out eligibility criteria for CES. It says, once it has been determined that a child has a developmental disability delay, then if appropriate, a referral can be made to the Children's Extensive Support Program or other community services or programs. In the case of the CES program, as with all CHRS DDS programs, this is done through developing the individualized plan, IP, see Section 5 for more information. During the IP planning process, the family and the CCB support person, aka case manager, service coordinator, or resource coordinator, should discuss the full array of service options and generic community supports which can meet their child's needs, including a comprehensive discussion of the benefits and alternatives of each. The CCB support person plays a critical role in assisting the family to gain a reasonable understanding of services, supports, and/or resources available so they can make an informed decision. Okay, I know that was a lot, but I kind of want to, I always like to say that out loud for people because it's like, you're the parent of a child who's got a situation so serious that this child is actually in danger of being removed from the home. This is a lot for you to be fishing through, right? You're probably short on time and exhausted and like, you just like, we've got to find a better way to get this through, right? So next slide, please. First thing we want to, oh yeah, we've got an undefined acronym in the title, right? Keep going. And then we've got complex sentence structure. We've buried the lead. There's a lot of information in here that frankly, the parents don't need. Next slide. Yeah. And like, I mean, we don't want AKA in any member com. Yeah, there's a lot going on in here. Okay, next slide. Yeah, just complex sentence structure. We've kind of buried the lead. Like there's a lot of fluffiness here before we actually get to the part that the parent is actually going to be really interested in. Okay, next slide. So what's the first thing we're going to do? First thing we're going to do is we're just going to get everything out of there that we don't need. Next slide. And then with what's left, we're going to organize it in a way that's digestible with logical flow. We're going to make sure that we're, keeping it sentences on the shorter side as much as possible. So here's where we ended up. The Children's Extensive Support Program. Children with developmental disabilities or delays may qualify for the Children's Extensive Support Program. CES can help you care for your child at home and prevent out-of-home placement. So boom, right out of the gate, we're telling people very concretely, right? Like, this is what CES can do for you. Notice the phrase out-of-home placement. For many member audiences, that would not be plain language. But because of what we knew about this particular scenario, right? This is where the parent's going to get this information. Here's how they're going to get this information. Here's what they've been going through up to this point. We, talking to the subject matter experts, we felt comfortable using that phrase there because of what we knew about that. Again, audience and purpose. Okay. A community-centered board support person can help you. Together, you will develop an individualized plan for your child. During the IP, excuse me, IP planning process, you'll discuss service options and other community supports. Together, you'll make an informed decision about your child's care and decide if CES or another program would be best for your child. So, yeah, I mean, it's still a lot, but just more digestible and understandable than where we started. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, this is a great example of like, yeah, seriously, like 90% of the words in this thing are not necessary. Civil rights complaints can be filed with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Office for Civil Rights electronically through the Office for Civil Rights complaint portal available at giant URL. Okay, next slide. Whoop. I think that
I
one's
don't know
delayed.
what happened there. That
Yeah.
sorry, that might have been my
Oh, no,
fault.
you're fine.
I
Just go to the next
apologize.
one, maybe.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Oh, you're good. It's probably on the next one.
Oh,
Yeah, there we go. Okay. So here, a couple of problems here. First of all, there's that passive voice, right? Can be filed. It doesn't tell us who can file. And what we have learned through the years, like never underestimate how intimidating anything that has a whiff of legality can be for regular people, right? The passive voice could be interpreted to mean that like you can't do this yourself. Someone else is going to like someone fancy, like a lawyer is going to have to do this, when that's the last thing we want people to think, right? We want them to know that they can do this themselves. Next slide. There are too many unnecessary words muddying the message, right? Like 90% of this can go. Okay, next slide. So that's what we had before. And then next slide. And this is what we had after. If you think your civil rights have been violated, you can file a complaint online. That's really all we need to say. And then that helps people understand that they can do it themselves. They don't need to, they don't need anything else. They can do it themselves. Notice that if you're doing it on paper, you have to write out the URL. Obviously, if it's electronic, you can embed it when it's online for accessibility reasons. If you're writing it out on a piece of paper, just realize you don't have to include the HTTPS:///. That's just more characters for someone to have to struggle with. If at all possible, try to get a vanity URL going to make it shorter. But yeah, really all you have to say is, if you think your civil rights have been violated, you can file a complaint online. Okay, next slide. Okay. Yeah, that one. Yeah. Okay. So before, this determination does not affect your Health First Colorado eligibility. And so, we just broke it down into 2 sentences and just made it more concrete, right? You still have Health First Colorado coverage. This letter is only about your home health request. This is courtesy of MEAC, frankly, because through the years, one of the things they have told us is like, when you're sending us a denial, if it's not a denial for coverage itself, please make it clear what it's actually denying, because some of the letters are so confusing and ambiguous. People were thinking that they had lost all of their coverage when really the denial was just about a particular request, right? So next slide, please. Okay. This came to us, this was going into accounting communication for members. An administrative Medicaid claim was established against you for medical assistance payments that were received on your behalf based on HCPF guidance and operational memo, blah, blah, blah. Claim number X established for this time period has been suspended. At this time, no further repayments will be collected. Okay, so there's a lot going on in here. Next slide, please, because I see we're also running out of time. I don't want to
so
go
I
over
was just going to mention, I know you have a 3:30 meeting, so I wanted to do a little time check
Yes, thank
for
you for
you.
that. Actually, that meeting ended up getting canceled, but I know you have other speakers too, so I'll make this part really quick. But essentially, here, sorry, go to the next page. I'll wrap this up quickly. Yeah, so here's where we ended up. You've been making monthly payments to us because you received medical assistance you didn't qualify for. We are writing to let you know we will not collect any more payments from you because of new guidelines we must follow. So again, we're not going to bury the lead. What's most important to me, if I remember reading this, we're going to make that front and center, try to keep it short and simple, words people understand, pull out anything that's not necessary. And that's just really kind of at the heart of it. And I think that might be the end. Amy, is that the last? Yes, that is the last slide. Okay. So then I just wanted to say again, if you guys have questions, follow-up questions or anything, feel free to reach out. My email is right there. And yeah, any quick comments or questions now before I hop or?
And thank you for all this information, Michelle. I know, writing and communication is such a big part of what we all do, especially when serving members who have varying degrees of literacy. I think this is really important. Thank you so much. I think we'll
Thank
have a
you.
lot to think about. I know I've even sat in on this training before, and I had some good reminders that were brought to my attention. So thank you so much.
Great. Yeah. And for the particular kinds of writing you guys are doing, like I'm not even sure exactly how much it falls into alignment with these examples. So if you've got stuff you want to you're just curious, you want to send it through and just, have a quick chat or something like that, just email me. I'm always happy to talk plain language. All
Thanks
right.
so much.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Right. Hopefully everyone got some good information and good reminders there. I know there were at least a couple things from there that will stick out in my head for a while that I need to remember when I am doing my own writing. Any questions or any comments before we hear from our Assure Care team? Can you guys hear me okay? It looks like Michelle's screen was frozen. I hope it's not frozen on my end. Vanessa, I see you guys came off. Hopefully you can hear and see me okay.
Yes,
All
ma'am. I
right.
can hear and see you well.
Great. Okay, so kind of an abrupt pivot then. I'm really happy to have our Assure Care team here, Vanessa and Brianna. And is Sarah here as well, or is it the two of you?
Just the two of us today.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I guess I don't need to talk. You can introduce yourselves, and then I did kind of list the questions that we're talking about today. So I'll let you introduce yourself and go from there.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Vanessa Sparks. I am a software trainer with AssureCare, and AssureCare is the company that brings you the CCM product, and that is where you keep track of a lot of your data for your members. And so we've come here today to go ahead and answer some questions that you all have that you've presented about the CCM. I'll let you know that I live in the beautiful state of Wisconsin. I live about 90 miles north of Chicago, and it is about 40 degrees today and very foggy all day long. How,
Hi, I'm
Brianna?
Brianna Grinke. I'm also a trainer at AssureCare. Just like Vanessa, I'm from the Midwest. I'm just north of Minneapolis, and we are also 40 and foggy here. So, handing it back to you, Vanessa.
Thanks. Did you have slides for us, Amy? Yeah, yeah.
One, I think this is the only one that just highlights the questions that we were going to talk about today.
Perfect. All right, so these were the questions that we wanted to address today was about cues, particularly things like that, and also documents. So if you're okay with this, Amy, I will go ahead and share my screen and we'll walk through some resources to answer these questions and a quick demo in the CCM. Host has disabled participant screen sharing, Amy.
Look at that. Oh gosh, I did not anticipate this part. Sorry about that. Let me think about this
That's
really
okay.
quick. I apologize. The team, does anyone know really quick offhand how to allow someone to host?
Yeah, if you have the host permissions, you should be able to go to the participant list, click on their name, and add as a co-host.
Lovely. I think I just did that. Thanks so much. Will you try now, Vanessa?
Yes. Looks like I am able to. Share screen. Okay. All right, so I should be sharing the CCM screen. Can we see that? Good.
Yeah, it looks great.
Over here to Google Drive first. All right. So we do want to make you aware of resources that we have available to help you navigate the CCM. Now, I'll let you know that the organization of these materials has recently changed in order to benefit specifically all of you on this call. And so we do have in the Google Drive, we can hopefully, is Brianna able to add content to the chat that everyone can see? If so, she'll add a link to the Google Drive for you all just in case. This is where we have all of our training documentation. This is where it all lives. But there's a lot of training documentation for various different kinds of folks, like case managers, transition coordinators, LCAs. And so we have recently gone ahead and created a couple of folders so that you don't have to wade through a lot of information that doesn't pertain to. So you'll see here that we have a transition coordination agency resources folder and also a local contact agency resources folder. When I click on this folder, there's a much more manageable list of resources for you. And these are the items that apply to your particular workflow in the CCM system. So you can see it's a little bit more manageable of a list. And so today I just wanted to call out a few of the resources that can answer these particular questions potentially that you have specifically about tasks and queues and about documents. So I want to point out to you that we have a document management job aid. And I'm going to open up that job aid. Now, before you panic, it is 44 pages long. However, a lot of our documents have table of contents. And if you take a look at the table of contents, while this job aid is going to walk you through everything you ever wanted to know about documents in the CCM, there is a section specifically about uploading documents for LCAs and TCAs. So if I click on this, I'm going to be brought to the section of the job aid that just pertains to this. So please do check this out. This is going to walk you through how to upload documents. It talks about some key important information about uploading documents, like how to name the documents that you're uploading. Here's some naming conventions listed for you. So this is a good resource for you. I'm going to walk through this in our demo today, but just wanted you to see where information is about uploading documents and hopefully show you that it's manageable information and you don't have to read a 44-page document to figure this out. Next, let's talk about tasks. Tasks and queues in the CCM. We do have a tasks and queues job aid that walks you through, again, everything that you ever wanted to know about tasks or queues. But there is a table of contents. So if you're looking for something specific, you can look through the table of contents and just jump to that area of the job aid that's going to walk you through step by step with screenshots how to perform a certain task. Like for instance, if you want to update multiple tasks at one time, you may want to click here and in a few pages, we'll walk you through how to do that. So this is another good resource. Lastly, I'll also point out here that we have the very top of the list with the 00 in the front, so it always falls to the top of your list alphabetically, a glossary. So if I open this glossary, you will find all of the job aids and videos that we have available for you listed here. And it gives you not just a link to the job aid, but also a little description of it so that it hopefully can enlighten you a little bit more about what is contained in this particular document. I also want to point out here for you that there is a list of videos. And so if you wanted a quicker, faster, just sit back and watch reference, we do have a short video on document management and on tasks and queues. So these items are here for you to use. Please take a look at these items. We have recently, again, like I said, made them a little bit more manageable for you by placing them according to your role so that you don't have to dig through. I don't even want to tell you how many job aids the case managers have to look at. But you have much fewer here for LCAs and TCAs. Please check these out. Let's get into the system. So here we are in the CCM system, and I'm going to demonstrate a couple things for you as far as how to manage tasks in a queue when you receive a referral via task. And then we're also going to talk about how to upload a document for you and talk about some tips and tricks for both of these items. So here we are in the CCM, and we've landed on the dashboard. And the very first thing that you see when you land on your dashboard is your task list. And this is a list of all of the tasks that are assigned to you. Now, first and foremost, a lot of times we get asked the question, what is this and what is going on and why do I have a couple of tasks showing up here and only a couple of tasks? Well, we want to let you know that the dashboard is organized in a way to call to your attention the most important items. And so basically items that are soonest due. However, Your workflow doesn't necessarily focus a lot on tasks that are urgently due. And so this may not be very useful to you, but I'll let you know that this little pane right here is calling out any tasks that are due today or overdue. That likely doesn't mean that much to you. So if you want to look at your tasks, simply click here and it'll give you your task list. Now, as a really ground level, back to the basics, let's make sure we address what is a task? A task in the CCM is a unit of work. It's essentially an item on your to-do list. Tasks in the CCM are typically system generated. No person created this task. It is almost always, although sometimes you might get one that someone actually created, they're system generated. And tasks are generated based on what other people do in the system or what you do in the system. So I perform X action, and the system creates a task that will indicate the next step in the workflow. So just so you know, tasks are built for you, to help you. That is their goal, is to assist you in your workflow process. Now, these tasks are assigned to me, but tasks also live in queues. So let's look at a queue and talk about queues a little bit. I scroll down and I will see that I have work queues. What's a queue? A queue is basically a holding place for tasks based on topic, based on portions of the workflow. So you can see that there's a queue that handles eligibility, there's a queue that handles assessments, and there's a queue that would handle ADT events, or there's a queue that would handle in-reach and rapid reintegrations, things like this. So these are tasks that are filtered and assigned to buckets based on like the topic or the action that's taking place in the task. Now, work queues are assigned based on your role. So what you're seeing here listed, you may see some queues that you don't have access to in the CCM, and that's because I'm the trainer, so I have access to certain queues that you may not. Likewise, if you are a transition coordinator, you might have access to certain queues, and potentially your manager might have access to different queues, and HCPF staff has access to different queues. So these queues are used for different purposes and are determined by your access, particularly for the role that you perform in the CCM. So how do we use these queues? Well, let's pop into a queue and check it out. We're going to use, as an example, the InReach and Rapid Referrals queue. If you don't use this queue, that's okay. They all work exactly the same. So we're going to use this as our example today. I click on the queue and I land in the queue. First thing I want to call your attention to are these filters at the very top. The first thing I want to point out to you is the due field. Again, certain workflows of individuals who work in the CCM are highly focused on tasks that are likely to be due right now, and they need to prioritize their work based on work that's due today. That may not be the case for you. And so really the best thing that you can do is, as soon as you pop into a queue or your own task list, change the due date to all. You'll see that it defaulted to today and overdue. So change it to all, and now I see more tasks. Also want to point out the active, complete, and all buttons. Tasks, when they're completed, do not disappear from the CCM. They still exist, and so you can access them, but you probably don't want to see them. So you probably don't want all, you probably want active. I'll also let you know just briefly that you can design a preset. You can design a view for yourself. And so I have designed a view for today, the view that I like. And so you can design a preset at any time that will organize the way that you see these columns and what information is presented to you and in what way. Feel free to check that out. It's something that I think, as a user of the CCM, you should really do, because it just makes your life a little bit simpler. And so now I'm seeing all of the active tasks that are due anytime in the InReach and Rapid Reintegration Referrals queue. So we can see that we have some information that's contained in each of these tasks. I have a due date. I have the description of the task. I also see who the task is assigned to. As you can see, we are in the training environment, and these people do not exist. I don't have to worry about PHI today. And we also have a status here that we're going to talk about in a second. And this tells me who the task is assigned to. I'm going to pull up a task real quick so we can just talk about the anatomy of a task. See this little clipboard? This is going to help me to pull up this task and just look at the details of the task. So every task has certain elements. The task has a description. This description is supposed to tell you what you need to do. It'll have a priority and a status. The status assigned can be a little tricky. So we have a number of different options for our status. Assigned basically means the task isn't complete, it is active, and it needs to be done. There's also an option to complete and reject a task if it's not a task you're able to do yourself. TCAs specifically utilize this status in a workflow. And then you can see here that a task can be assigned to a person. So I want to point out that this task says assigned, but it's not assigned to a person. What assigned means in this status field is that the task itself is not completed. And you can see that it also lives in a queue. So tasks live potentially in 3 places: in a member's record, in a task list, or in a queue. And I and you can edit any of these fields in this task. And so this is where you can take some action with a task. So I'm going to go back to my list. And I'm going to see here that one of these tasks is already assigned to Brianna. She's working on it. This isn't something that I need to worry about in any way because Brianna is handling this. But I see some tasks here that are not assigned to anybody. So if this is a task that I want to work, that I'm going to work, it's possible that my manager or the department will assign this task to me, or I could assign it to myself. Just depends on your workflows, how things work in your LCA and your TCA. But this is something that I can do. I can click on Imperial Walker, this task that tells me that I have a referral here. I'm going to go ahead and open the task, and I can just assign it to me. I could assign it to someone else too. I could search and assign it to someone else, but I'm just going to click this easy assign to me button and click save. And now this task is assigned to me. What does that mean? Well, again, the task is for me to help me to walk through a process. And so anybody who comes into this queue is now going to see that this task is assigned to me. It's on my list. And this task will now appear in my task list. Now, this task list right here only has 3 items in it. It's very likely that when you look at your task list, you're going to have more than 3 items. So I want to just let you know that you can sort by the description, the type of task. You can sort by the member. If you want alphabetically which members this is for, you can sort by due date if you would like to take care of tasks in the order that it was due, or you can sort by the date that the task appeared in the queue. So it's essentially the date the task was assigned to this queue. I can move these around in order to find tasks that I want to address. When it comes time for me to address a task, I can access the task in this queue, or I could go to my task list. Doesn't really matter. It's all the same. Remember that I want to switch my due to all. And then I'll see here in my task for Imperial Walker, it's now in my task list. When I'm ready to address the task, I just click on the task. And it's going to bring me to the member record. And I'll have a taskbar right here where I can easily access this task. You can see it follows me throughout the CCM wherever I am in the member record. So if I need to go somewhere in the member's record and take care of some things, maybe an assessment, I can do that. The task sits here. When I'm done with my task, I can click on it. When I've done whatever needs to be done, I can go ahead and complete this task. When I click complete and save, now the task is in a completed state. Still assigned to me, still in the member record, still in the queue. However, it's completed now. And so I basically checked something off of my to-do list. I want to show you here in activities, the tasks are also in the member record, and they look a little different in the member record because in queues, we can filter out completed tasks. We don't here. See, we still have 2 completed tasks. So if you're looking at tasks in the member record, what we recommend you do is sort by status. Luckily, assigned is an A, so it comes up to the top of the list. And now my completed tasks are at the bottom of the list, so I can just look at the completed items if I want to. So that is tasks and queues and how to manage those tasks when you have a referral task and you want to take action with that. Let me really quickly demonstrate for you uploading a document, and then we'll go ahead and take any questions that you have. So in order to upload a document into a member's record, you are going to want to navigate really to any place here in the member record on the left menu. Usually you'll want to upload in the workflow process that seems appropriate. So I'm going to go to case management and I'm going to go to the assessments area here. Now we're going to want to upload documents in the page resources. Page resources is that little white triangle on the side of the page over here. Notice it doesn't live here right now. So this is sort of the library of assessments. Page resources only lives in the details. So if I create maybe a new assessment, such as something like maybe the InReach. Once I open and create the assessment, I now have a page resources. So I can answer a question, click save. And now my assessment is going to live here in the member's record. And now I'm going to go ahead and maybe I have a document to upload. So I open up my page resources and here's where I can do a lot of stuff. I can enter an activity log. Here are some references if I need them. And here's where I upload a document by clicking on plus. I want to attach the file, and so I click attach file. So let's talk for just a moment about something that might not be very intuitive. The subject is not going to be what other users are going to see. What other users see as far as the title of this document is not going to be the subject line. It's going to be whatever you name the document on your local machine. So when I choose my file, before I take this step, I want to make sure that whatever document I'm uploading has an appropriate title because that's what everybody else is going to see. And so we had shown you in the document management job aid that it listed some particular ways that you should be titling documents. So before you take this step, before I click right here, I want to make sure that my document has that appropriate titling, which I've done. So we click choose file. And I'm going to go to my desktop. And I'm going to see that I have a guardianship paperwork. And so I'm going to go ahead and click on it. And now this says that first F name, L name, guardianship date is successfully selected. You can see it right here. And then I'm going to go ahead and put in test subject, the date I received it, the time I received it, who I got it from. You can see I'm entering test for all of these items, right? I could enter notes if I want. I click upload. And now right here in page resources, as I said, the title of the document is whatever I titled this document on my machine. So here it says F name underscore L name underscore guardianship underscore date. So now here it is. It's attached here. I can view the document anytime I want. I could print the document, download the document, do whatever I want with this document. It is now attached to the member's record. We can see here it's attached in this particular assessment, which lives in the assessment portion of the case management. However, there's another place that you can view documents. If I go to activities and documents, I'll find that the document center is sort of like a document library. It contains all of the documents uploaded into this member's record, no matter where you uploaded them. And so we can see here, here's our guardianship paperwork that we uploaded. It's visible here in the document center, but again, you'll want to upload it in page resources. So tasks and queues, few tricky things. Something you always want to remember about tasks and queues to help you make sure that you're seeing all the tasks and queues that you need to see is to make sure that your due says all. That way you're not missing anything that you want to be seeing. Remember that you can click on the little clipboard and you can edit either the status. If, for instance, there is a workflow where you may need to reject a task, you're a TCA. This is where you would do that. Otherwise, you can assign tasks to yourself. You can make any of these changes that you'd like to the task. And then to take care of the task, all you need to do is go ahead and click on the task, and it will send you to the member's record. Here we were in Imperial Walker. You can also view the task under activities. And then remember, when you've done whatever it is that you're done doing, you can click on the task and make sure you complete it. And then the task will show anybody who enters the member record or the queue will see that this task was assigned to you and you took care of the action associated with the task. So what questions do we have about tasks and queues and uploading documents that we can help answer today? Amy, I think they'll have to raise their hand to come off mute. Does that sound accurate?
People can just come off mute if they have a question, I think.
We'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Hi,
Those of you oh, sorry, go ahead, please.
this is April. So I have a question. When we're uploading a document, let's say, for example, it's the guardianship. I went and saw the client today, but the guardianship paperwork is for July of 2025. Which date do we put in there? When we put the date the guardianship paper went into
That is a
effect
good question.
in July or today?
Let me put, I believe it is going to be the July, but let me look.
Okay, I thought
This
so,
is it
but
here
then
let me make sure.
okay.
So it does give instruction on what date to use here in the job aid. Did I go to the right place here? So effective date.
Effective date. Okay.
So we want the effective date there. Does that answer that question for you?
No, yep, that answers it. I saw you typing in a date for today, and then I was like, wait a minute, no, I'm lost. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so okay, let's clarify that. So when I typed in the date to the upload, I was typing in the date. So let me go back and show you that field. So I did type in today's date, but let's make sure we clarify that there are two dates. So if I'm uploading a document, so my document title might have a date on it, but when I upload a document, I'm also asked when this document was received. So if you received the document yesterday, you could put yesterday's date, even though the document may have, you said July's date as far as the effective date. Does that make
Got
sense?
it. Yeah, but
You're right. There were two dates.
okay, but the one that we save on our desktop or whatever, that's the one that we would want to put July of 2025. So that way when we upload it, it'll say first name, last name, guardianship, July 1st of 2025.
Correct.
Right? Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Question. There's lots of places where we have multiple dates we're thinking of, right? Where do they all go?
Any other questions for Vanessa and Brianna?
Okay, so I have another question. Sorry, guys. So if we accidentally make a mistake and we have already uploaded, because we notice we can't like delete anything. Can we delete anything or fix anything on our site, or do we have to email somebody to fix it?
No. I believe you could reach out to the support center.
Okay.
There's a phone number to the support center. They can take it down
and
you can re-upload.
Perfect.
While you're thinking about questions, I'll also give a reminder to our TCA folks that next week on the 11th at 1 p.m. we do have a training for all transition coordinators. It is a new transition coordinator training that is open to all for our first time presenting this training. So please do send all of your folks who are able to make it. We have never had this kind of training for you all, and we want to be able to provide it even for folks who have been doing this for a long time.
Wonderful.
Shameless plug.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Shameless plug.
Thank you so much for this. I think it was probably really helpful. Any last chance for any questions for the AssureCare team? All right. Thank you guys so much. As always, we really appreciate you.
Absolutely. If Brianna wants to just throw our email addresses into the chat, I handle the training for TCAs. Brianna handles the trainings for LCAs. If you have any CCM questions, please feel free to reach out.
Perfect. Thank you. And I did include the links to the 3 job aids in the slide deck here. And so after this meeting, when we email out the slides, then you will have access to those. Can you see my CCM resources slide right now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Great. All right. Brianna, Vanessa, thank you both so much.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good day.
All right, we are almost done. I know it's getting a little bit late, but I did want to also talk about just a little bit about upcoming meetings. As always, we are always looking for your feedback on what you want to hear about, on what you think would be interesting to discuss or hear a presentation about during future TSAC meetings. Here's just a sampling of some things we've thought about so far that may make an appearance during a future TSAC meeting. Regional accountable entities or RAEs, billing processes, Social Security and Medicare, long-term care Medicaid application information, and HR1 and federal changes. We always like to allow time for the group to offer suggestions on what else you would like to hear about. All right. As always, if you think of anything else, just reach out to any of us here at HICPUF with an idea and we will make it happen. On the topic of future topics, I wanted to introduce another idea we have, which is, and please tell me you can still see my screen, right? I'm not able to see that I'm sharing, but I'm assuming you can. We would love to introduce a time for you all to share a little bit about yourselves. You all are really valuable members of our community and valuable partners and have a lot of great information and experiences to share. So we thought it would be really wonderful if we could do a showcase and share segment every month. A brand new TSAC feature, hopefully beginning next month in April, to highlight all the good work that you do. And so what the vision is that each month, either on a volunteer basis or as we reach out to people kind of on a rotation rather, invite you just to kind of share a little bit about some things that your agency is doing. And I listed some examples here on what this could be, whether it's shortcuts or best practices for the work that's common to the group, community partnerships that you've participated in, celebrations or events that your organization is hosting. If there are things you want to share about alternative populations you serve or other programming you participate in, I think that what you all are doing would be really valuable to share with a group. Thoughts or questions on this? Would anyone like to volunteer to be the very first showcase and share, I guess, showcaser and sharer for April? All right, not seeing any volunteers right off the bat doesn't mean that we might not get any. But just so that we may be reaching out to you to see if your agency has something to share with a group that others may benefit from learning about. All right, now this is our time that we always reserve for questions and open discussion. Feedback about the information that was presented today or in a meeting prior to today, we're welcome to, we are willing and happy to hear about that as well.
I have a question. This is April. What was that training, or what day was that training next week? For new TCAs?
Question. I think she put it in the chat. Let me see if I can find it.
Okay.
Well, I'm not seeing it right now, but
Can we send out the link? Because I don't know if we sent it out. Maybe I just haven't got to it yet, but
it's next Wednesday at 1 to 2:30.
Janelle?
Okay, thank you.
Else? Anything else from anyone? If not, we can let you go a little early, but happy to hear questions or comments.
Hi, I joined the session very late. Is there a recording available?
Yes, thank you for asking. This meeting is being recorded and it will be sent out. Actually, it'll be posted on the TSAC website within the next week or so, along with the slide deck. All right. I'm not hearing any other questions or comments and not seeing any hands raised. So we can end this meeting for this month. Happy almost spring, everyone. I hope that you have a nice rest of your afternoon and we will see you next time. Thanks so much for joining. I'll hang on for just a second in case there's anything else that anyone has.
Just clarification, what is the TSAP website's address?
Let me actually just put it in the chat because
Okay, thank you.
that will be easier. Bear with me for just a second here. I'll put it in the chat right now. There you go. You should see it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We really appreciate you attending and we'll see you next time.